Sunday, August 28th, 2022, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. We're going to look at today how central bankers are playing with hyperinflationary fire. Yes, we've seen Jay Powell at Jackson Hole a couple of days ago. The market took his comments as being very hawkish, that he's going to keep raising interest rates. But I'm going to prove to you that Jay Powell is a dove, really. He's not a hawk. He's a dove impersonating a hawk. And we are in a very dangerous situation, I would say, in terms of the currency. And it is dangerous for them, but actually it would be a blessing in disguise going forward. Yes, it's going to be very painful, and we already know it's very painful what's going on, the inflationary environment. So we're going to look at why I think they're totally behind the curve, and it's not just Jay Powell, it's also Andrew Bailey at the Bank of England, and also the ECB, the bankers at the ECB. I noticed that they're starting to try to talk tough as well. I saw there's a headline here: ECB officials warn of sacrifice needed to tame surging inflation. So we're going to look at that. Before we start, I just wanted to say I will be doing the Sunday live stream today, and we've got a guest that will be Rafi Faber, who comes on about every month, and I'm sure a lot of you enjoy having Rafi on. So that will be at the usual 9 p.m. London time. So I'm going to refer a couple of books. One of them is a dictionary from the 1970s, early 70s, the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a pocketbook dictionary, to see how inflation was defined back then. And you might think, well, what do you mean? Inflation is always the same thing. No, just like they're changing definitions of everything today with the woke philosophy or woke movement, they're also changing the definition of natural immunity, or they're changing the definition of what is really healthy for us, right? They've done the same thing with economics and money. And why have they done that? Well, because it was the only way for them to keep this fiat currency bubble going. They had to brainwash a couple of generations of economists, bankers, politicians, to believe that inflation is actually not the creation of currency and credit out of thin air, but this statistic that they keep called the CPI, which is actually just the consumer price index. So they've really done a great job, and I'm here to point the spotlight on that, and why knowing the correct definition of inflation is so important. And unfortunately, I think it's the lack of understanding of the definition of inflation, and that's why I'm always really adamant about going over this. It's going to create a major problem. Well, it has already 50 years of major inflation, and they've been hiding it. But now it's coming home to roost, in my opinion, and that's why I think there will be a hyperinflation. There will be a collapse in purchasing power, not just of the British pound and the euro, but also of the dollar and all fiat currencies that are linked to it. So let's go to page 365 here in my dictionary to see what they saw as inflation back then. So it says, an abnormal increase in the volume of money and credit, resulting in a substantial and continuing rise in the general price level. So it doesn't say it's a rise in CPI. So keep this in mind when we go over some clips of Jay Powell last February 2021, actually last year, February 2021, in a testimony to Congressman Warren Davidson of Ohio. And also keep this in mind when we go over some clips of Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey, November 2021, and more recently in August this year. But we're going to have another lecture. We're going to refer to Ludwig von Mises' Human Action. It's like the Austrian School of Economics Bible, kind of Bible, I would say. Ought to be on the bookshelf of every thinking man. That's what the Wall Street Journal used to think. I'm not sure they think the same these days. And we're going to go over how the conditions for hyperinflation, or what von Mises also calls the crack-up boom, or the flight into real goods, gets ingrained in people's psychology. And that's where the central banks as well are wrong, because they look at inflation as the CPI, and they just think it's a number and that they can tinker with the number. They don't look at it as a psychological thing, and that hyperinflation actually has got nothing to do with how the economy is doing, but more to do with the supply of the currency. So it's going to take a little while. I'm going to just have a quick drink of my coffee to clear my throat. So we're going to start on page 426, section 8. The anticipation of expected changes in purchasing power. The deliberations of the individuals which determine their conduct with regard to money are based on their knowledge concerning the prices of the immediate past. If they lack this knowledge, they would not be in a position to decide what the appropriate height of their cash holdings should be and how much they should spend for the acquisition of various goods. So what does that mean? That just means that people in general know where prices have been and where they're going, and that makes them mindful of how much cash to keep or not. A medium of exchange without a past is unthinkable. That's another thing that's interesting. Where do you think the dollar and all the other fiat currencies derive their, how can I say, their value? Well, from over 100 years ago, when it used to be gold and silver, when the currencies that we have now were just like a promissory note for real money. And that's why gold and silver is so important when the system comes under pressure or is under threat as it is now, because it will revert to gold and silver. Nothing can enter into the function of a medium of exchange which was not already previously an economic good, and to which people assign exchange value already before it was demanded as such a medium. So the reason why gold and silver are so important is that the currency, the dollar or the pound, the pieces of paper, they didn't just come out of the blue. It would have been impossible for the central bankers or the government just to say, oh, we're going to come out with this new piece of paper and it's going to be money. No, it has to have some history. Anyway, let's continue. But the purchasing power handed down from the immediate past is modified by today's demand for supply of money. Human action, and that's what the central bankers forget. Very few of these central bankers, I think, know anything about the Austrian school. They're all brainwashed Keynesians, I would say. So let's continue. Human action is always providing for the future, be it sometimes only the future of the impending hour. He who buys the future for future consumption and production, as far as he believes that the future will differ from the present and the past. He modifies his valuation and appraisement. This is no less true with regard to money than it is with regard to all vendible goods. In this sense, we may say that today's exchange value of money is an anticipation of tomorrow's exchange value. The basis of all judgments concerning money is its purchasing power as it was in the immediate past. But as far as cash-induced changes in purchasing power are expected, a second factor enters the scene: the anticipation of these changes. He who believes that the prices of the goods in which he takes an interest will rise buys more of them than he would have bought in the absence of disbelief. Accordingly, he restricts his cash holdings. He who believes that prices will drop restricts his purchases and thus enlarges his cash holding. As long as such speculative anticipations are limited to some commodities, they do not bring about a general tendency towards changes in cash holding. But it is different if people believe that they are on the eve of big cash-induced changes in purchasing power. When they expect that the money prices of all goods will rise or fall, they expand or restrict their purchases. These attitudes strengthen and accelerate the expected tendencies considerably. This goes until the point is reached beyond which no further changes in the purchasing power of money are expected. Only then does this inclination to buy or sell stop, and do people begin again to increase or decrease their cash holdings. But if once public opinion is convinced that the increase in the quantity of money will continue and never come to an end, and consequently the prices of all commodities and services will not cease to rise, everybody becomes eager to buy as much as possible and to restrict his cash holding to a minimum size. For under these circumstances, the regular costs incurred by holding cash are increased by the losses caused by the progressive fall in purchasing power. That's a key there, loss of purchasing power. So even with CPI, or what they call inflation, at 3 or 4%, which would be a lot better than where it's now, you're still losing purchasing power. And you've lost purchasing power for years anyway. The CPI index has been moving up. So unless prices go down, really, your currency will never regain purchasing power. And that's where I think we are right now. The advantages of holding cash must be paid for by the sacrifices which are deemed unreasonably burdensome. This phenomenon was in the great European inflations of the 20s called flight into real goods, or Flucht in die Sachwerte, that's the German term for it, or cracker boom, or Katastrophenhause. The mathematical economists, oh, those are the Keynesians, are at a loss to comprehend the causal relation between the increase in the quantity of money and what they call velocity of circulation. So we're going to stop at that right now. And before we go into these clips by some central bankers, I just wanted to show you a bit of an anecdotal evidence of something I saw recently in the Telegraph. I think it was on the 26th, so it was on Friday. I was reading the Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph here in the UK, and it said middle earners need urgent help to survive energy crisis. Chancellor warns. As price cap surges, workers earning £45,000 a year are at risk from 80% jump in bills. That's another example here that the government, they're not going to stop inflating because they're going to keep helping. They think they need to keep helping. It's the Keynesian fallacy, and that's why it's not going to get better. But the reason I took this article is because I like going through the comment section. And I thought this was interesting here from this guy called John Dawkins. And he said, who's going to pay for these latest round of handouts? More QE, I suppose, further diluting the currency. We're definitely on the downward spiral. I'm going to spend all my savings before they become worthless. Weimar Republic, here we come. They are conservative in name only, absolute disgrace. A golden opportunity with an 80-seat majority thrown away by the blonde idiot. I think you know who the blonde idiot is. But what I found interesting about this comment is that you wouldn't have heard this maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. Weimar. So it's starting to seep through the message, I think, and people are realizing they're seeing a lot of things go up massively in value or in price this year compared to last year and even prior to 2020. And they see no end in sight. So what they do, as von Mises says, they lower their cash holdings because the cash is losing purchasing power. And that's what hyperinflation is all about. When the demand for cash goes down massively and people don't want that cash, anything but cash, and the cash loses purchasing power. And people lose confidence in the currency. They just want anything that is tangible and valuable, any service as well that is valuable. So what I'm going to do now is play Jay Powell's testimony. I think it was February 2021. And you will see how he associates inflation with CPI because he talks about base effects, so he's got no clue, in my opinion. And then he will get a question about actually what that comment that Mr. John Dawkins said about diluting the currency, right? By issuing more currency, by borrowing more. The congressman from Ohio, Warren Davidson, asks him about dilution, and you see what he says. So here's the clip.
I would just say that we do expect inflation to move up, both because of base effects, as I discussed yesterday, and also because we could have a surge in spending as the economy reopens.
Is it diluted as a store of value when M2 goes up by more than 25% in 1 year? Does the printing of more US dollars somehow diminish the value of the dollars that others hold?
You know, there was a time when monetary aggregates were important determinants of inflation, and that has not been the case for a long time. So you'll see, if you look back, the correlation between movements in different aggregates, you mentioned M2, and inflation is just very, very low.
So now we're going to go to a clip which I put together here. It's Andrew Bailey being interviewed in November of 2021 by Sky News. And you will see what he says. Back then he was saying, by spring 2022, we're going to see inflation, or CPI, come down to 5%. And now he's saying again that he expects inflation to come down to 2% in the next year or two. So I put those two together just to show you how these people are completely, how can I say, unaware of what's really going on. They've got it wrong on inflation because they're looking at the consequence of it. They're just looking at numbers and base effects. And you saw as well when Powell answered Congressman Davidson about M2, he said, those don't really have an impact. The increase in the supply of money and credit doesn't matter, right? So here's the clip from Andrew Bailey.
What we've currently got is an increase in inflation, which has really, taken hold during this year. And unfortunately, we expect that to continue over the winter period. In our latest forecast, we think it will probably peak, sort of spring next year, and then start to come down, around 5%.
We do think it's going to come down, going through next year and beyond.
So there you go. Just before we finish, I just wanted to go through the Jackson Hole speech by Powell, but not in 2022, but in 2021. And I'm going to put a link to it as well in the description. You can read the whole thing and you'll see how he's talking about CPI, base effects, 0.4%. He's just looking at these numbers and not real inflation. But it's interesting that he says here, but that concern is tempered by a number of factors that suggest that these elevated readings, well, CPI readings, are likely to prove temporary. There you go. This assessment is critical and ongoing one, and we are carefully monitoring incoming data. So there you go, temporary. And now they're calling him a historian, that he's seen that I think it was Arthur Burns lost control of inflation, and how Volcker did a really good job. But I'm sorry, Jay Powell or any central banker nowadays, they're no Paul Volcker. The problem they have is that the only way really to stop the road to hyperinflation is to basically raise rates tomorrow to 20% and just kill everything, kill this credit induced bubble. But that would be catastrophic. That would be a deflationary collapse. So what we're going to get is a hyperinflationary collapse. And Wall Street and the mainstream economists still believe in this CPI thing, and they still trust Jay Powell, but I think he's going to be proven wrong, just like he's been proven wrong in the last year, just like we were warning a year ago or 18 months ago that these people were just like deluded to say that the CPI was going to come down, because they don't really know the true definition of inflation. So with that, yeah, I'm going to say goodbye to you guys. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you share it far and wide. And also think about subscribing to my channel. And I'll talk to you later during the live stream. Rafi will be there too, of course.